Arutavoch, and I'd like to dedicate this shiur to Refuah Shlema for a shliach in Potsdam in Germany, Reb Nochem Ber Malka. He had unfortunately a stroke on Friday, and I think it's an urgent enough condition, we understand, to justify saying Tehillim now. So if I can trouble you to join me. We have now a Minyan, and we'll say Kapitel Nun Aleph and Kapitel Chof. It should be a Refuah Shlema, and I'd like to dedicate the shiur also for Refuah Shlema. I'm not saying Mr. David, Beveil of Nasan Hanavi, Kasher, Vayigash, Shavach, and any other him, Kachasdecha, Karev Rachamecha, Shem Chep Shoi, head of Kapseni, Aveni, Ome Chatosi, Tarin, Kif Shoi, Ani, Eda, Vachetosi, Negli Summit, Chalavata Chatosi, Vara Beinecha, Sisi, Ilman, Titstak, Vedovrecha, Tiskab Shafrecha, Hein Baovin Chalalti, of Chetja Hamasni Imi, Hein Emes Chafasta, Vatuchos, of Sassam Chachmas, Diani, Chateni, Veezav, Veetot, Kapseni, or Michel Almin, Tashbeini, Sassam Simchat, Gilna, Samestikisa, Haste, Panecha, Mechatoi, Hal Avenue, Samiche, Lev to have royally, Elihim, Roch, Nachain, Hadesh, Bekiri, Altas Lichenim, Fanecha, Roch, Kochach, Altikach, Mimeni, Ashiva Lisa, Sen Yeshecha, Divas Macheni, Lambda Fashim, Dochecha, Vechatoim, Lecha Yashuvu, Atzilenim, Dam, Elihim, Lehes, Shoasit, Ranin, Lasheni, Tzitkosecha, Doinas Vasai, Tiktok, Afi, Agida, Tehilsecha, Hilesach, by Zevach, by Atena, Oila, Lysirsa, Sivchel, him, Ruach Nishbora, Lev Nishbar, Venitke, Elihim, Lysivze, Etiva, Besenecha, Tzia, and Tivne, Chaimes, Shulaim, Ostach, by Sivchet, Tzedek, Oila, Vachalal, Ozialo, Al, Mizbacha, Choparim.
Should I take your phone?
I'm not saying Mr. David, Anchad, in the game, so give Hashem, Elohei Yaakov, Ishlach, Ezra, Chamukodesh, Umitzion, Yisadecha, Yisker, Kolmin, Chaisecha, Vedoski, Dashnasela, Itan Chachel, Vecho, Cholasosa, Yamali, Neran, Nabisho, Secha, Vashem, Elohim, Nidgil, Yamali, Adina, Kol, Mishalasecha, Atiodati, Yahishi, Adina, Mishihoi, Yanehu, Mishme, Kodshe, Bigburis, Yesha, Yaminoi, Eida, Varechev, Veida, Vasusim, Anachno, Vashem, Adinoi, Elohim, Nazkir, Hey Makoro of an Afolov, Anachno Kamno Vanis Oidod, Adino Yeshua Melchiane, Nivim Corino.
I'm supposed to let people in.
Misha Ber Chavasena Rom Misro Yaki Mesha Andom Shleme, who Yerapi es Nochem Ber Ben Malka, which Hakol Spallen Bavura, Stock Bavura, Bschaze, Kodesh Boch, Yimoli Rachim Olav, Achlim Rafes, Lachzika Lachusai, Yishlach Lem Heir, Refuah Lemen Hashemayim, Laramach Yivalv, Shasagidab, Sech Shar Chel Yisrael, Refuah Sanefesh, Refuah Saguf. But Neymar Omen. Indeed, I'll give to Stocker later. Okay. So the first thing we have on our list today is a question which I was quite challenged by, and that is about Gilgulim. And we say every day in Brochos in the morning, Shomash and atop by Behi Tahirahi, and Shomash starts off as Tahira. And then So then how does that reconcile with the concept of Gilgulim? So let's go a bit further back into the Gemara. The Gemara is actually a very well-known Gemara for Chabadniks, because this is the basis of the Tanya Seif Perek Yomon Denida, in the first page of Tanya. The person before is born must be an Oisati Tzadi Valti Rosha. And so that conversation also includes Vaheve Yedea. They say to the neshama, Shakadosh Baruch Hu, that's the third line here. Every should be aware, Shakadosh Baruch Hu Toher, the which is pure, Mashors of Toherim, and his messengers, his servants are pure. The neshama shenosam b'chot Toherihi, and the neshama, the soul which is given in you, is a pure soul. So the question which was asked is, how do you deal with a case where we know that many people, there's the concept of Gilgul, that the neshama has unfinished business and comes down to this world for a second innings, as we'd say in England. So how do we say that the neshama is tahira? This is the question. So I did do some searching on this and came up with the following. First of all, I found a sefer called Marpei Loshen. Now, this is written by Rebbe Fall Hamburger, who for Lubavitchers is known as the Eltazeda of Rebbe Khan or Rebbe Fall Khan. He published a sefer called Rov of Anash and a sefer called Teras Yukosil. This is another sefer of his, to Marpei Loshen, I guess it relates to the name Rafal. And he says the following explanation. The neshama, when it started off its journey, its first, right from the beginning, was tahora. It may be it has acquired some baggage on the way. So so for that it needs to have now this current life will be able to be metake and to rectify what would happen, but and bring it back to the original state of tahara. So what he's saying is tahara is going back all the way to the beginning of the neshama, before it came down for its first presence in the body. I saw another pirush, tahara, that, and this is actually, someone once asked the Rebbe, which I didn't manage to trace it now. I remember reading it. Someone asked the Rebbe, how do they deal with the previous Gilgul? How do they address the duties or whatever, responsibilities? And the Rebbe's advice is, you don't know about it. It's not, you don't know about it. So you can't be expected to be responsible, to be actively responsible. So it's something which has to be in the subconscious, perhaps, but not on the conscious level. You're not conscious of it, therefore you can't be responsible to take a particular course of action. I did see, whilst I was researching, that if you find one area of your avodah is particularly challenging, that's probably what your Gilgul has come down for that most challenging part. So this is again. So the first mahalach was the neshama at the outset was tahora. The second approach is that in your mindset it's tahora. The fact there may be some baggage from before, that's none of your business, so to speak. I'd like to suggest a third mahalach, and I'm certainly open for other explanations, that the neshama which has baggage comes down again. It's neshama that's tahora. It's got challenges. Now, every neshama, we understand, has got a mission. Every neshama is, each person's unique, and every person has got a particular mission to achieve in life. And they wish to help. So hopefully you fulfill that mission. So you have a mission. Does that mean you're tainted because you've got a mission? It means your work is cut out for you. So if the neshama has come down because it's got work cut out, let's say because of baggage from a previous existence down here, so what? But it's not a tainting, it's not a dirt on the neshama. It's a mission that the neshama has to deal with. But you can still go back to the concept that it's tahora. As I say, I'm open to other answers, but let's move on to the next question. Okay, so here we have a question. A shliach in Geman is very active in Mivtza Chanukah, and he got this very tall menorah, a 9-foot high menorah, and he goes from one small community to another community, and tells them in advance it's coming this and this night, and they're going to have a Chanukah gathering, and this place. He's going to light the menorah. Okay, and so the locals come, and they've got this 9-foot menorah, and not to light it, you have to climb up a ladder. So the locals are not ready to climb up the ladder. But he wants the locals to make the brocho and to light it. So what he's been doing is he's been asking one of the people there who's able to say a brocho, to say the brocho and light the candle. And then the shliach himself climbs up the ladder and puts the candle on top of the menorah. So here he's asking the question, is that acceptable? And the good thing was he asked me on the 8th day of Chanukah. So I didn't have to answer him right away because it was, a little bit late to ask the question. But now let's go. We have here in Shulchan Aruch, there's a discussion in Gemara, Halocho is a mitzvah or Hanocho is a mitzvah. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins, Halocho is a mitzvah v'loy Hanocho. That it is the kindling which achieves the mitzvah, not the placement of the menorah, which means if the menorah was in a particular place, not l'shem mitzvah Chanukah, and then it was moved, then you moved it and put it in, let's say if it's important to be al pesach beis mibachutz, and you lit it inside, and you then lit it inside and carried it out and put it there. So you're not yotzer, because hadlocha is a mitzvah, not hanocha. The mere placement of the menorah in the place is not good enough. It has to be lit in the right place. For the same reason, if you had a shoshis, if you had a lantern which has been burning the whole day, the last 24 hours, you can't just put it there and say, oh, it's still burning, it's good enough. No, you have to put it out and rekindle it, l'shem mitzvah. And he writes there in Shulchan Aruch, tzorch sheyadlikana b'mkoim hanochasa. If you lit it inside and you cut it out, you're not yotze. And then this is the crucial part. If you kindle the menorah and you're just standing and holding it, you're not yotze. But he adds a reason. Because the onlooker says he's holding a lantern. Obviously, he needs a lantern, but it's nothing to do with any pirsumei nisa. Okay, so this is where we have a question of lighting in a menorah, lighting a lantern, and it's in your hand is a problem. Now, then the Mishnah Berurah, however, says das hataz, that this objection that if you're holding the lantern, you're not yotze. That's only if oichaza calls man mitzvah, only if you're holding it throughout the time of you doing the mitzvah. If you hold the menorah which is already lit, and then you put it down, so there you are yotze. So the Taz says it's yotze. So therefore, according to what the Taz says, for sure, in this case of this tzaddik who goes around to the small communities, you are yotze. Kama achronim, other achronim are mefakbek. Okay, fine, but we certainly have good grounds to rely on. Now, I want to perhaps make this clear that in order to make, are you yotze? Is anyone yotze with the menorah which you light in a public place? And perhaps we've discussed it before. The idea is it has to be a kosher menorah. You cannot make a brocho on electric menorah. It has to be a menorah, the chefza has to be a kosher menorah. And the Rebbe did say that you should announce by the public lightings that no one is yotze, their personal duty. So there's, in a sense, almost like a gavra chefza. There is a person has a duty to light menorah at their house. There is a separate inyan, which is, the Gemara says, a person who's traveling, whatever, he doesn't have a house. So there is the idea of seeing the menorah, and we are like with the basis of the menorah in shul, according to some Rishonim, is that you're lighting the menorah in case someone doesn't have a menorah at home. So then they will see the menorah, and so you're making a brocho in shul. No one is yotze. The chazan himself goes home and makes another brocho, but he's achieving a chefza. That there's a chefza here. That it's a kosher menorah, it's a kosher halachic, and someone who sees it will at least be being exposed to the concept of persuminism. So it is important that the menorah has to be a kosher menorah. That's the point which I wanted to make clear, that the menorah which you're lighting a public place definitely has to be a kosher menorah, a kosher halachic. Okay, let's go on. So here also just over Chanukah in a small community, they haven't had a minyan for a long time partly because of COVID, and there's one frum man who lives in this community. And now he doesn't want to make a minyan on Shabbos, probably because it would cause a lot of chilul Shabbos. But Sunday, Rosh Chodesh, this past Sunday was Rosh Chodesh and it was Chanukah, so he had galvanized a minyan. The last Motzei Shabbos, I got a call. It turns out that this fellow is in the Shnasa Avelis. So now, as an oval, is he allowed to lead the davening on Rosh Chodesh? So this was the question. So let's take a look at this in Shulchan Aruch. So we have it on the screen. So this is in the end of Siman Shin Ayin Vov in Yeridea. This is Ramah in Yeridea. Avol loy nohagu lispalel b'Shabbos v'Yom Tov. Afal pi she'ein isur b'davar. That it's not customary for an oval in the year of Avelus to be the chazan for Shabbos and Yom Tov, although it's not an isur, but it's not customary. I will be moisha choil, mishirel yispal, and if he is able to daven an oval, should daven at the Yomit in the Shnasa Avelus. I'm talking about a particular Yosem for a parent. So that's the Ramah, the minig of not davening on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Then we have in the Shach, which is on the lower left side of the screen, so it's also customary not to lead the davening in the Yashnas Avelis if it's on Yom Neroim. Then the Shach adds, if there's no one more suitable, then he can be leading the davening, and he gives a reference to it for this. What's the reason for this? And I didn't find a clear thing, but I understand it's got to do with the union of, first of all, Shabbos and Yom Tov has got to do with Simcha. I want to share with you an interesting thing. I'm sure many of you are aware that the Baal Musaf and the Baal Tekeya is given an aliyah on Yom Neroim. What's the reason for him being given an aliyah? Take off some money of the income of the shul. So it says in Sforim, the reason for this minig is because a Baal Tefillah should be in a state of simcha. And to be he's moitzi the tzibur, he should be in an uplifted, he should be inspired and uplifted. You give him an aliyah, it gives him stimulates a better mood, etc. So that's the reason why you give him an aliyah. So coming back to the hero Shabbos and Yom Tov. So Shabbos and Yom Tov, the Chazan, if he's in Shnas Avelis, is in a state of grief to a degree, a state of mourning at least, and therefore it's not inspiring that he should be the Chazan for Shabbos and Yom Tov. Yom Neroim, that doesn't seem to fit, but perhaps yes, I just mentioned they should be a state of Simcha. In addition, it's perhaps not a bar mazel, maybe something on those lines. So that's about Shabbos and Yom Tov and Yom Neroim. Now, what about other dates? So, what about Rosh Chodesh? So that's not written in Shulchan Aruch, not in the Shach either. So here we have from the Sefer HaMinhagim, where he writes Rosh Chodesh. So this is the rule which we will follow: that any day where there's Musaf, the oval doesn't lead the davening. Not by Shachris and not by Musaf, but not even Mincha and Ma'ariv. So that's the Minhag Chabad, and he gives a source in Minhagi Beis Harav. It gives a reference to Pri Megadim. Now, the Polish, the broad Polish minhag is actually much wider than that. That they wouldn't have an oval davening any day of Chanukah, and not davening on Purim, etc. So there, and this is actually not a Polish minhag in origin. It goes back to Minhag Hamburg, Minhag Frankfurt or something. I looked around. It's an old German minhag actually, but that's there's different minhagim about that. But in Chabad, it's Yom Sheyesh Be Musaf, and what we do in Chanukah is just for Halal itself. The Chazan goes away from the Omed and lets someone else take over because Halal is a time for Simcha. So you see here in the Sefer HaMinhagim, he gives us a source in the Pri Megadim. So I've put the Pri Megadim on the screen also. So the Pri Megadim in Tofer Shein Aleph and Mishbetzos Sif Koton Ches, where it talks there about a person in Avelis not saying the brocho Shechianu. So the first night of Chanukah, when you light a Menorah, so you say Shechianu, but it's not appropriate for an oval in the Shnas Avelis to say that Shechianu. At home we'll say Shechianu, but to stand up in public and he'll say Shechianu Lizman Hazeh, so an oval wouldn't do so. Not the first night of Chanukah, nor if he's Balkoire on Purim. So someone else will say the brocha because of we went through this, I think, but I remember this. But my father was Avelis, so someone else said the brochas. But let's keep back to the point over here that then Pri Megadim is saying, okay, so the first night. The Chazan won't be who's in Shnas Avelis won't say Shechianu. It's mashma that other nights of Chanukah when there's no Shechianu, so the oval will light the Chanukah and thing. And he davens Mincha and Ma'ariv and Shachris. He says Til Baruch Sha'amar. So here you have an interesting thing that just Til Baruch Sha'amar. And then he says Chamish Osa B'Ov and Chamish Osa B'Shvat like Boimer, where there's no Halal. Then he can daven Shachris also. So here we have the minhag which we are following is more or less what the Pri Megadim is saying, which is a little bit different about till Brocho or till Hazaras Hashaz. Okay. And then he says, what Chalamoid, he didn't allow the oval to daven the Omid. Indeed, as he said, that's our minute. Okay, so that's the kind of tidied up that question. And so coming back to the original thing, so yeah, indeed, the Chabad minhag would chazan and on Rosh Chodesh, an oval would not be chazan, but certainly if there's lekla de odif minay, if there's no one else better, and certainly if there's no one else at all, for sure, then he can be. Also, when it comes about Yom Neroim, so the minhag is that if a person has a chazaka over several years to be a chazan, so then they would continue to do so in Shnas Avelis, Rachmana litzlan, on Yom Neroim too. Okay, so now the next question is from my Einikel. Now, are you allowed to play with snow on Shabbos? Apparently in New York, they've already had a generous helping of snow. So here we have, this the first line you have here is from the Sefer Shmiras Shabbos Halocho. So he says, you're not allowed to make snowballs or snowmen on Shabbos. And the reason for this is because of boina. Boina is where you're taking particles or little components and you're making a structure from them. So when you're taking particles of snow and packing them together and creating a ball or creating a snowman, that is boina. Of course, it's not going to be long lasting, at least in English weather. But okay, so that's a isur of boina. What about the snow itself? He holds that the snow is not muksa, even if the snow came down on Shabbos, which is an interesting question. Is snow muksa? Now, there's a concept in halacha called noilad. Noilad means a new entity, a new status. It wasn't like this before Shabbos. It's like the Beitza Shenel de Yom Tov. Before Yom Tov, it wasn't an egg, and now it's become an egg, so to speak. Yeah, something on those lines. So the snow, as it is in the sky, it's in clouds, and then it comes down in water, and then the water freezes and becomes snowflakes. So those snowflakes is l'chayre noilad. So on the left side of your screen, you have here a quote from Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, where he's saying that Yadua, the snow only is formulated as it gets close to the ground, and that means it wasn't in this form before Shabbos. And nevertheless, it's not called noilad. So he doesn't really explain himself very well. He doesn't want to consider it noilad. The right side of your page is from the Sefer. There's a Sefer by someone called Bodner, or Pinchas Bodner, I think his name is, on muksa. If you may, it's in English. It's actually in English language. It's a tall, purple kind of Sefer. And he writes, obviously he wrote it about 30-something years ago. He writes, I heard from Reb Moshe Feinstein, Hagon Reb Moshe Feinstein, that since snow is not normally used for any constructive purpose, and snow is not considered an animal food, therefore snow should be considered muksa. Never mind snow which fell on Shabbos, where we have the problem of noilad, but even if it fell before Shabbos, it's muksa. So we've got the concept of, let's say, sand. Sand is muksa because it's it's a commodity which you can't use, you can't process on Shabbos. That's the concept of muksa machmas gufa. Paint is muksa, earth is muksa. Things which you are not able to, it's not kelim, and you can't use them on Shabbos. That's why he goes through this discussion. If snow would be used for something, then perhaps, or for eating or something, then perhaps you'd say it's usable. But because it's not used, therefore it's just like dirt, and it becomes a problem of muksa. Then he quotes, this is Bodner, he writes, he refers to the Shmiras Shabbos Halocho, who quotes Shlomo Zalman, who says that snow and rain are not noilad. So I do find it quite unclear whether snow is muksa or not. And we see here Reb Shlomo Zalman was taking the view that it's not noilad, and I guess he's saying it's not muksa either. And Reb Moshe Feinstein is of the opinion that it is muksa. So, all right. So the Shmir Shabbos Brochos was a Talmud of Shlomo Zalman. In the Pnim is written that the snow itself is not muksa. So he allows playing with the snow, but not making snowballs. But this is, I've got a much bigger question. If according to Moshe Feinstein, snow is muksa, are you allowed to sweep your path? Well, actually, you're not allowed to sweep a path on Shabbos in any case because of mashva gumos. That is an issue in any case. Let's just go a little bit further and look at this famous story in the Kutei Diburim. It was one time, it was talking about, there's the whole thing about the very cold, Chag HaSukkos. And it says that they needed to eat, and whenever they wanted to eat, they had to shovel the snow off the sukkah. And Shmini Atzeres was on Shabbos, and because it had snowed a whole night, so the Alter Rebbe said they should tell Kuzma, who's the caretaker, they should tell him we have to eat in the sukkah, and so long as there's snow on the sukkah, we can't eat in the sukkah. So Kuzma, he cleared off the snow, and then the Rebbe made Kiddush, and they had Shabbos and Yom Tov in the sukkah. So what was the problem? Why did they have to get the goy to clear off the snow? Was it because the snow was muksa? Or was it because the snow it made the sukkah posel? And to make the sukkah kosher would be like as if you're fixing the sukkah. But possibly they just considered the snow was muksa, and that's why they didn't want to shovel it themselves, and they got the kuzma to shovel the snow. So I don't know what the minig is in places where they do have heavy snow. Do they shovel the snow on Shabbos? But the other side of it is that there is a din that if glass shatters in a place where moken shel rabim means even 3 people, so you're allowed to clear the broken glass, although broken glass is for sure muksa, because of hazeka derabim. You're allowed to clear away a hazard for the public. So if the snow is a hazard where people might slip, so that is a heter as far as muksa is concerned. I still don't know what you can do about the issue of sweeping a path, but you're not allowed to sweep a path on Shabbos. So I don't know how you get around that as far as snow. So in London, we don't have such big snows to have to worry about it. I'm sure in other places, they do already have a well-trodden path. Sorry about the pun. Okay. I just see on the chat, someone's pointing out that Chanukah Tovshi Memhei, Reb Osher Sasonkin took off a candle to light it, and the Rebbe told him that he shouldn't do that. Thank you. All right. Versteht sich, if there's not Shalei B'Shas Ad Chak, one doesn't have to do such shtick. Here I think it's a little bit of a Shas Ad Chak to get those people to be involved, and they're not going to climb your ladder. So, all right, but thank you for that. Okay, so now I was told that there's going to be, or there is already, some kind of comet visible in the Northern Hemisphere. I understand you have to get up at some unearthly hour, like about 6 a.m. or something, to see it. But what's the story about a brocha? So we have, everyone's familiar, the last perek of Brochos, perek Haroya. We have a Mishnah, al hazikin v'al hazvois. So one says the brocha oisem ma'aser bereishis. What is zikin? So here we have the Bartanura, it's highlighted in yellow. Zikin koichav hanira k'moi p'shepeseach harakia v'yoyre k'chetz min bokem lemokem. It's a star which looks like it's tearing through, opening the heaven, and it's flying like an arrow from one place to another. I think that's what we'd call in English a shooting star. Alternatively, koichav shenira sheyesh lezonav oruch. It's a star which looks like it has a tail. Now, my little bit of research, and I'm sure I'm going to bungle this one, there's meteors and there's comets. A comet is the star which has a tail. It is a kind of a star. The other one, the meteors, are just bits of debris, which and they're moving, and that's the type which you see them moving a lot. Whereas the comet, you don't necessarily see it moving. You just see a star with a tail. So we have two pirushim in the word zikin. Which one is it that you say the Oisa Maaseh Bereishis? So now that's the Mishnah. Then we have the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Reish Chav Zayin Chaim Al Hazikin. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo, who kamin koicho vayoyre kechetz beoyre hashamayim mimokim lamokim v'nimshach oyre keshevet. It's flying across the heaven and it leaves a trail and looks like a rod. So that's where he learns pshat, and that's what we would call a shooting star. That's called a zikin. You make a brochos of Maaseh Bereishis. Mishnah Brura comments on this, and he says, "Yesh oimrim shu koichav sheyesh lezono." It is the zikin is what we call a comet, it's a star which has a tail. V'shevet shel oiros. It's not just a round star, as normally stars are, I guess, roundish shapes. This has got a tail. Or Shneim, he says they're both halacha. So that's the Mishnah Brura, the Mechaber, and the Mishnah Brura. Then we have the Alter Rebbe in the last perek of Birchas Hanenin, and he says Halazikin, and that is Koichav Hayoyre Kechetz Ba'erech Hashamayim, and so he says it's what we call a shooting star. Now I want to explain something. If you make a brocha on a shooting star, which is a meteor of some sort, how much more so you should make a brocha on a comet, because the shooting star apparently is a much more common occurrence. The comet is a much lesser common occurrence, and therefore if for the more frequent one you would make a brocha, how much more so on the less frequent one. Now I see someone's added some clarification here. Thank you. I'm not going to try to read it. Okay. This is going back on the previous question. Would it be possible about the Menorah? Would it possibly make the brochas and the shliach to light immediately as he stands on the ladder, and then there would be? Yeah, so you're suggesting that he will be standing at the top of the ladder, they'll be standing on a foot, and they will say the brocha aloud. Yeah, that's certainly a possibility, but I think that he wants them to be involved as much as possible. So if they could light it, also it's more glad that they would make the brocha and light it. Okay, certainly that's another option. Yeah. Okay, so I think that whoever sees this comment can make the brocha Oisa Maaseh Bereishis. Yeah. Okay, so here we have a question. Crayola crayons. A kid left a tray of Crayola crayons in the oven, and then someone turned on the oven, and now the Crayola crayons became a nice cholent, and now it turns out apparently the Crayola crayons are not good for vegans, as they status. They're not vegan friendly. They are made with about 40% of animal fat goes into a crayon. So then the crayons are treif. Yeah. My father once told me there was a fellow who had a ongechaptem shagas and he wants to eat treif. So he had always said you have to be very careful about the candles. It shouldn't drip into the soup or whatever. So the candles in the house were treif. So he wants to eat treif. So he went to the cupboard and pulled out a candle and bit into it. And he said, if this is what treif is, I'm not interested. So so the candles and the crayons are treif. We can take that. But on the other hand, they're not tasty. They are non-toxic. That's a rule. They have to be non-toxic, but they're not tasty either. And therefore, we can rely on the principle of, so someone asked this question, and a rabbi had told her you have to buy yourself a new oven. I don't know why he didn't tell to kasher the oven, but be'emes you don't need to kasher it either, because we have a concept of noisen tam lifgam. And here we have the Siman Kuf Gimel, where it says in Yeridea that kol dover shetame pogum, something which is has an off taste, an unpleasant taste, it does not cause treifus. It doesn't forbid the things which the foods, etc. And then it says even if it's not totally, it just doesn't enhance this food. It gives a bit of an off taste to this food. It does not make the food treif. So now I was a little bit anxious about this. what about the kalim? Because later there are more further here in Siman Kuf Gimel talks about perhaps the kalim would be an issue. Now, to explain what's the reason for this, there are foods which are not compatible with A, they are compatible with B. So the moshel, wine, in some food, wine would be enhancing the taste. In another type of food, wine would ruin the taste. So you got something which is subjective. It's not tam pogum be'etzem. It's only subjectively tam pogum. So now, all right. So in this dish, you had it was a tam pogum. But in this recipe, but if tomorrow you'll use the same keli, it could be that this food will be a tam l'shvach. It will be a good taste. It will enhance the taste of the other food. On that basis, the Ramo is concerned that even though it did not make the food treif, because it's tam pogum, it's possible that the keli should not be used again without kashering because of it might be tam l'shvach in another food. If that's the case, I think we're on safe ground. That with crayons, I think it's going to be in any food. Crayons are not going to be nois and tam l'shvach. I can't speak from experience, but I'm assuming that's the case, that they would not enhance any food, and therefore it'd be safe to say that the kalim do not need to be kashered. Of course, if you can kasher it, of course, matoiv manoim is always a good thing. I want to just share with you a Meshuggah Shaila which I got today. With my pad. Yeah. In some small community, there's a woman who's a balas tshuva and keep Shabbos, kashrus, etc. And today her son had a meshugas. He decided to fry himself an egg on Shabbos. So now the mother's asking, can she use the pan? Is the pan become treif because it was used for cooking on Shabbos? So this thing is the beginning of Shin Yud Ches. I'm just digressing, but it's a bit related. It's the beginning of Shin Yud Ches that if a person who cooks on Shabbos, b'mezid, so loy osu la'olam. It's for him that food is also forever, not only the food, but also the keli. Because the food is osu la'olam, therefore the keli which is absorbed, the taste of the food is also, that keli is osu la'olam. So I wrote back that for the boy, the pan is a problem. For the mother, he can't answer the keli for his mother. It's only lo yosu la'olam. For her, it's mutter. What about if the mother wants to make food for the son? And now he's going to have a tam from the. So I said, I think that because the problem is it was a Teflon pan, and you can't really kash a Teflon because a frying pan has to be kashed with libun, with fire, and you put fire onto the Teflon, it's going to ruin it. So it's a question of throwing out the pan, etc. So I responded that even if the mother makes food for the boy, so after 24 hours, it's going to be Eine Ben Yoimoy, and it wouldn't make it osa for him. That's the best. Can you kasher it? As I said, a frying pan is difficult to kasher, yeah, because you'd have to use libun, and you can't do libun on. The reason for this is if it was a pot, I asked him, did he boil eggs or did he fry eggs? If he boiled eggs, you can kasher because something which absorbs through liquid, you can kasher with a liquid. An omelette, which is absorbing without liquid, so then it's without a medium of liquid, then you'd have to kasher with fire, and that doesn't really work on a non-stick. Okay, let's move on. All right. So one of our listeners on the recordings, it was last week or 2 weeks ago, I spoke about a knife which had traces of cheese, and it was left in a fleishike cup. It was a milchike knife with traces of cheese, and it was in a milchike cup, and someone poured boiling water. And I'd used the approach of klisheni, that the klisheni doesn't answer the keli. It was a fleishike cup, and here's the cheese being really klisheni in relation to the cup. So one of our listeners, he asked, why did you say that? Why don't you look at it as Irui? And he's actually right. And Baruch Hashem, someone picks up on these things and corrects me. I'm happy to say he's right. And so now I'll explain this a little bit more. So we have the Kli Rishon is the keli which was sitting on the fire, and it has got even if it's taken off the fire, it's still got heat in the walls of the keli. It's got a vibrant heat. Kli Sheni, the food wasn't heated here in this keli, and so typically the walls are actually going to cool off the food. So Kli Sheni Einim Mavashel. So again, a Kli Rishon has got a reserve of absorbed heat, and therefore Kli Rishon is Mavashel even off the fire. Kli Sheni he's got the Defonis Mekareris, it's off the fire, and furthermore, it's got its own coldness, it's going to cool off. So Kli Sheni Einim Mavashel. What is the story of scalding, of when the Iri, the water is being poured from the Kli Rishon? It hasn't landed in the Kli Sheni, it's in the air. Does it have this? It doesn't have the vibrancy of the Defonis Chamos, the hot walls of the Kli Rishon. On the other hand, it doesn't have the Defonis Mekareris, the cooling off walls of the Kli Sheni. So this is the question, and the consensus of poskim is that Kli Rishon is mevashul k'dei klifa. So this is you have on the right margin, on the right under the screen. Sorry, the Shach from Siman Kuf Hey, where he says that Irui Kli Rishon mevashul k'dei klifa. That when you scald something, so it's going to cause cooking, just the first layer, thin layer, and so on that basis, when you scalded, when you poured with the kettle onto the cheese on the knife, and so then that hot water is milky hot water, and it lands in the cup. So it's an Irui Kli Rishon, and therefore it would make the cup milchik, and it's fleshik also. So therefore it is a problem. Yeah. So that's as much as I knew on Thursday night when I sent out the notes, and then I got on Friday. Rabbi Zirkin said I should have referred to, he writes me an email, I should have referred to Siman Tzadik Hey in the Ramo, and here we have in the Ramo in Siman Tzadik Hey, it actually talks about washing dishes, and it talks about if you washed milchik and fleshik together, does that make it treif? Now, if there's no soap there, that's a big problem, yeah? Now then he says, well, you have it highlighted, Avolim Eiro Mayim Roischim, you poured hot water, parava hot water, and it was on kalim shel bosav shel cholav b'yachad. If you shuman dovuk b'hem, even if there is fat stuck to the faleshik kalim, milk kalim, hakol shari, the ein iri Kli Rishon mamish. He says that Irui is not as strong as Kli Rishon, and so therefore the Ramo is saying if you washed faleshik and milk together under a jet of hot water, it would not answer it. He says Irui is not enough, not strong enough like Kli Rishon, and so therefore the cup, in our case, this fleshik cup would still be kosher. That's the Ramo. Then we have at the bottom, we have the Shach, where he is not so happy about this, and he says we'd see elsewhere that we do recognize Irui as cooking, and therefore if we had kalim of bosav and cholav, one is clean and one is not clean. So then, and you poured boiling water, so the clean one would become also. And that's the case which we have over here. You had the knife with a trace of cheese, and you had a clean fleshik cup. So the boiling water would have caused an absorption of milchiks into the fleshik cup, and it becomes also. Then he thinks about what about the knife? Does that become osur? But then you're going to say there's going to be a fleshikite going to be exuded from the cup, and it's going to make the knife osur. That he is not so sure about. So to sum up this, so we see that the Ramo would hold that the cup, in our case, remains parv, whereas the Shach would say that the cup has become osur because it's got milchiks and fleshiks. And as I said to this lady, if it's a single cup, not part of an expensive set, just give it away to your cleaning lady or something like that. All right, let's move on. Since we're speaking about Irui, we have now another question about Irui. And this is a shliach sent me a question. Okay, he asked the question about, he has a non-Jewish helper and they're serving the kids breakfast or something, and the non-Jewish helper pours boiling water over instant oatmeal. Is that a problem of Bishul Akum? So there's two aspects to this. My response to him was that I don't think oatmeal is a choshev food, and it's not oil al shulchan malachim. You wouldn't be serving oatmeal at a banquet, and therefore it doesn't come into the question of Bishul Akum altogether. I think that's a clear point. But he asked a more lomdische question: is Irui called Bishul? Is scalding the same as cooking? Because Bishul Akum has got some exceptions. For example, although meliach kireseach, although salting is the same as very hot, and kovish kemevushol, and pickling is considered like cooking. But as far as Bishul Akum is concerned, neither salting nor pickling is considered Bishul Akum. It's only if it's mamash cooking. Also, smoked food is not subject to Bishul Akum. There's a whole question about steaming. Is steaming subject to Bishul Akum? In other words, Bishul Akum has got to do with chasnus, getting friendly, and so when it's not a conventional form of cooking, then Bishul Akum wouldn't apply. So actually, this question whether scalding would, and if the scalding makes the food edible, would that be an issue of Bishul Akum? So actually, I looked this up. There's a sefer called Chelkas Binyamin. He focuses a lot on Bishul Akum, and he shows that the Yerushalmi possibly holds that it's okay, but then he goes a bit about back and forth whether we would aser Irui if there was a case of Irui made a food which was inedible became edible, and it's a food would it become an isur of Bishul Akum? That remains a bit unclear. It's not a problem for most foods. Also, a cup of tea is not a problem. If a guy makes a cup of tea, it's not a problem because the main thing is the water. The food, the tea is just a flavor. It doesn't come into Bishul Akum. We're talking about some type of solid food which, by scalding it, is going to become edible. I don't know how many foods there are in this category which should have the question. Okay, let's move on. So here, in Geman, he's been learning Rambam regularly for several years, and now he's got a certain job where he's able to listen to shiurim whilst working. He finds listening to Rabbi Josh Gordon his Rambam shiur, he finds that he understands it better than when he's learning Rambam on his own. I'm sure he's not the only one, but he's asking, is he yotzer the inyan of Limud HaRambam by doing this? So I think we've gone through I recall that we had a discussion in Parshas Vayeschanan last year, that's why in my notes, that we had a discussion whether listening to a shiur is considered limud HaTorah, and are you chayav b'birchas HaTorah? If you remember, you had the case of a person asked if they're giving a shiur to people who don't say brochos, are they being machshel them to be learning Torah without birchas HaTorah? But so let's take a look here in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch in Hilchos Talmud Torah, and the Alter Rebbe is saying here that when you're learning Torah, you should be particular to articulate. You should be articulating what you're saying, whether it's Mikra, Mishnah, or Talmud, unless you are stopping to think. If you learn just, he says, if you're learning just in thought and not uttering when you could, you're not yotzer the mitzvah of v'lemadatem oisam. How do we know that v'lemadatem has to be b'dibur? Because it says a pasuk in Yeshua, lo yomush sefer haTorah hazeh mipicha v'hagisa bay. So we see that the limud HaTorah has to be b'dibur, and so too, whenever there's a mitzvah which has to be b'dibur, so you're not yotzer with hirur with thought. Elo imken shemeya mipi hamadaber. When you're listening to someone giving a shiur, let's say about Kriyas HaTorah, maybe whatever that, so then you're listening, so then you can say Shemea Koine. That's called it's as if you're actually saying it's through through listening. But certainly that doesn't fit with listening to a recording, listening to online, etc. You wouldn't be able to say, I don't know about simultaneous, to say Shaila Lamaisa yet of that moment, yeah. But listening to a recording for sure, you wouldn't be able to say the concept of Chanukah I, which is based upon the concept of Shliach Shalom Kamoisha. It doesn't work. So I, what I wrote to him, that you will be yotze the mitzvah of Yedias HaTorah, but you won't be yotze the mitzvah of Limud HaTorah. These are two separate. The Alter Rebbe is mechadish this. Before the Alter Rebbe, the poskim struggled with this. The Alter Rebbe mechadish this distinction. There's mitzvahs Yedias HaTorah and mitzvahs Limud HaTorah. Limud HaTorah has to be bedibur. Yedias HaTorah means that you absorb the concept. So for sure you're fulfilling the inyan of Yedias HaTorah by listening to an online shiur. But are you yotze mitzvahs Limud HaTorah? And then he's asking also, there's a new word in English called hashkafically, halachically and hashkafically. Are you yotze hashkafically by listening to a shiur? And what I suggested to him is that he murmurs along as he's listening to the shiur. He murmurs along some of the words, at least of the Hebrew words. In this way, he's yotze the inyan of limud HaTorah. L'chayre, I would think that the Rebbe's takana is taka limud HaRambam. That was a lashon. So one should be saying a little bit bedibur. So someone's asking the question: are we yotze limud HaTorah now? So I said, you mentioned already. It's Yedias HaTorah. Right. Finally, this is my last question for this evening, and that is, someone came over to me Thursday night, and he says he noticed on for the forthcoming Tanis Yahafech L'Simcha that there are conflicting zmanim. There's a website called My Zmanim, and there it says the dawn is 6:07. Chabad.org website says 6:02, and he asked for some clarification. So I'd like to explain this. Before saying that, there's another zman, and it's very confusing. There's a zman which is 72 minutes before sunrise, flat. Doesn't matter, winter, summer, whichever part of the world, 72 minutes flat. The later of Padve, Reb Heinich, he held that opinion, that it's the Alos HaShachar is 72 minutes flat, and it makes no difference. But then when England started having, was it double summertime or something, that they were keeping summertime in the winter, it became a whole parsha. This is going back in the 70s, I think, or even earlier. So then it became very difficult for people to daven shachris before going to work. So then he worked through this whole sugya, and he published the kuntras, also yoim, also boike v'gam loilo, and he starts finding heterium. But as far as there are some many poskim who take that view that Alos HaShachar is 72 minutes flat. The Alter Rebbe clearly doesn't hold this way. The Alter Rebbe and the Gro, etc. Now, don't use the term shoyos manios. We all know, anyone who's learned Mishnayos, Brochos knows about shoyos manios. That doesn't help you, because we're talking here about the time of the transition between night and day. And if you tell me shoyos manios, I'll ask you which ones. Shoyos manios at 12 on the night hours or the day hours. It doesn't help you. The Alter Rebbe works with degrees. And what we mean is that the sun rotates around the earth, whichever way you want to, at least from our vision, it's the sun is rotating around the earth. And at sunrise and sunset, the sun is 90 degrees from where we are. And then before sunrise or after sunset, the sun goes further down, and therefore it's out of view. In the morning, as the sun starts creeping up closer to our horizon, then it starts getting gradually lighter and lighter. So the question here is, at what time do we, when, at what point, what degree beneath the horizon is sunrise and sunset? Now, the diagram which you have on the board, on the screen, is to tell you the following, that your ability to see the sun will depend on where you're standing. And if you are on a higher viewpoint, a higher thing, then you'll be able to see the sun for longer. So if you look at, I'm going to use the pointer if it works. So if I'm going to be on the lower, on the top of the big ball, so when the sun sinks lower than the level hay, then I won't be able to see the sun. Whereas if I'm standing on top of the little ball where the aleph is, so then I will be able to see the sun longer. So now, if I am standing by the coast, I'm in Haifa. Now, this is the Alter Rebbe's picture. I'm standing at the coast of the Mediterranean. I'm in Haifa. I'm looking towards the west, and the sun is setting. And I see the sun is actually set. Okay. I turn around and I look eastwards, and I see Har HaKarmel. There's the Carmel mountain range there. So for a couple of minutes, I'll look at the top of Har HaKarmel, and I'll see that the sun rays are still shining there. It's still gleaming. The rays are visible on the top of the mountain. Of course, if I had been at the top of the Carmel, I would still be able to see the sun. So imagine there's two fellows, one at the top of the mountain and one at the bottom of the mountain, and they're on the phone to one another. And one says, I can't see the sun. The other one says, I still can see it because it's the top of the mountain. So instead of having to have a phone call, if you're at the bottom of the mountain and you're looking eastwards, you'll be able to see the rays of the sun at the top of the mountain. This is the Alter Rebbe's Chiddush, where he differentiates between what's called Shkia HaNidis and Shkia HaAmitis. Shkia HaNidis means you're standing on the regular coast and you see the sun in regular built-up area, and the sun is out of view. That's Shkia HaNidis. But then the Alter Rebbe says that Shkia HaAmitis is several minutes later, because it's taking consideration the Horim HaGvoim Shebeit Yisrael. Had you been at the top of the mountain, or had you been looking at towards the top of the mountain, you'd still see the rays of the sun, which means the sun is still in eyesight. It's still visible from that viewpoint. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe gains several minutes. He says it's in Yisrael, it's about 4 minutes, the difference between Shkia HaMitis and Shkia HaNidis. If that is true in the evening, that Shkia HaMitis is several minutes later than Shkia HaNidis, it is true then in the morning also, that Netz, which is the moment of sunrise, so you've got Netz HaNidis, you're looking now towards the east. Doesn't help you, by the Mediterranean, you won't be able to see the east, yeah? But let's say you are, Westcliff, and you're looking towards the sea, and you see the sun rising. That's Shkia, that's Netz HaNidis. Had you been on a higher plane, 800 feet higher, you would have been able to see the sun a couple of minutes earlier, a few minutes, 4 minutes earlier, or perhaps more. This makes it. So this is where we have, therefore, just like we've got Shkia HaNidis, we have also Netz HaNidis and Netz HaAmitis. Netz HaAmitis, I'm not sure whether it's now masculine or feminine. Now, therefore, if you look in the details of the Chabad.org, and you look at the Zmanim, you look at their algorithms. So the Zmanim, they both of them are saying 72 minutes translated into degrees, and both of them are starting from sunrise. But the starting point from where they're working backwards is a different point. So the Zmanim has started backwards from Netz HaNidis. And therefore, he goes 72 minutes back. He says that's going to be, the sun is 16.1 degrees beneath the horizon. Chabad.org are starting from Netz HaAmitis. When therefore, they're going 72 minutes back in degrees, and therefore their is 16.9.
You okay with going to file out?
That's the explanation why every beginning of a Tanis, you'll see that the Chabad.org starting point for the fast. They're saying that's the moment of dawn, 72 minutes, translated into degrees. That is going to be those few minutes earlier than the Maizmanim or other websites. That's because of the difference of the Alter Rebbe's Chiddush of Shkia HaMitis, which is different to Shkia HaNidis, and same thing works in the morning. I think that's enough to clarify this story. And I wish you all, as on Zaina, a gute Woche. And you hofech l'simcha, l'sosen, l'me'adim toivim. Someone's asking, do we need to measure the heights of the mountains, the place where we are calculating the time? I don't think so. It's an old discussion. What happens if there's no mountains at all? It's an alter lomdus, and the chayre from the Alter Rebbe, if you read it carefully, even if there's no mountains in the area, you'd still have this difference of Shkia Mitzis and Shkia Niris, although it's open for debate. Gut, a gute Woche und ich hoffe, Simcha.